The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great. Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, everybody, good morning. We are off and rolling here on a Monday, Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. We started right at 10. I was really hoping we were going to kind of surprise everybody with that 9:59 start, but I guess 10 o'clock is fine, too. But, guys, good morning. Happy Monday.
Morning.
Good morning.
What a pleasant day it is. It's beautiful outside.
It is. Only 12 degrees.
Only 12 degrees.
My driveway was a sheet of ice. That was fun. That was fun. Just kind of put it in reverse and just slid out. It worked all right.
Yeah, put it in reverse.
I'm over the cold. I'm ready for spring. I'm ready for summer. I'm ready for all of that. But we're off and rolling. A ton to get into today. We'll talk Reds. We'll talk Bengals. We'll talk college basketball, NBA All-Star game, whatever the hell that was last night. We'll get to that. But Casey, good morning. How are we? What do you got the jacket on today? Well, how cold is it in the studio?
It is cold in the studio, but I took it off because I actually wore something kind of warm underneath to counteract that. But yeah, my weekend was all right. I watched some Bearcat basketball. I was disappointed in that. Watched some hockey. Some what is this guy's name? Kachuk, Upchuck, whatever.
Yeah,
his name is.
yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
There's two of them.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun beating Canada, and then they booed our anthem. That was weird.
They did twice.
Yeah. It was just a weird weekend. So, anyways.
Well, good. But, Jacob, Elliott, happy Monday. How were our weekends? I know we woke up a little cold, a little snowy, but happy Monday. How was your weekend?
Well, actually, we got an interesting chatter in here this morning. I don't know if you saw.
New friend?
I don't know if you saw the chat, Justin, but it looks like Doug Gottlieb is in the chat.
Oh, wow.
And Doug has to say, "Hey, Kinner, you stink." Ha 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 ha. So I don't know if you want to address Doug personally, but it seems like he's calling you out.
Ironically enough, I actually have been going back and forth with Doug Gottlieb this morning.
Very nice.
Really?
Yes, yesterday. So obviously my worst nightmare happened. I kept saying I wasn't poo-pooing on Green Bay all last week because I had a feeling that this could potentially happen, and I didn't want to have clips of me out there talking smack, and then they end up. But no, Wright State has this player that shoots 56% from the free throw line. And late in the game, Green Bay's up double digits or whatever. And out of nowhere, I just happened to take my headset off and look down, and he is telling so-and-so, hey, you got to guard 56%. That's what Doug Gottlieb is referring to one of the players on Wright State as is 56%. So I sent him a note saying, I don't understand why as a head coach you find that to be, funny or whatever. I was like, I don't think that was very professional whatsoever. I was like, maybe we should start referring to you as, 6% because that's your win percentage in the conference. And I'm not joking. We've been going back and forth all morning and all this stuff. So I just, like I said, so that's ironic that the fake Doug Gottlieb's in the chat. I'm dealing with the real one.
Well,
and both
maybe it's not.
Maybe it's not.
Maybe your beef has bled into our YouTube chat.
Maybe. Just maybe. Doug Gottlieb, the phone lines are open or the Zoom link is yours, whatever. We'll get all Dougie. And I've always semi-defended him to Elliott and others. I've always said, hey, let's just see how this pans out. I haven't really poo-pooed on Doug Gottlieb too much. I really haven't. I said a while back that I was like, look, I don't have a problem with him coaching and doing the show. I understand why he's getting as much heat as he is. But after yesterday, no more. Say whatever you guys want about him. It don't bother me whatsoever. So there's that. But, my worst nightmare came true. I knew it was good.
It was their first win since November 19th. They hadn't won in 3 months, Kenner.
I don't even know. The last win they had was SIUE. I don't even know who the hell that is. It's not Southern Illinois. Yeah.
Right?
Is what it is.
Probably.
Right. Man, Michigan Tech beat them, but your Wright State Warriors couldn't get it done, huh?
Well, the Warriors couldn't get it done, or the Raiders couldn't get it done. Yes,
I call them the Warriors. Wright State Warriors sounds better to me.
Well, they needed some help.
Editorial.
Yeah, I think you gotta fix that, but that's all right. You want to do other headlines though?
Let's get to headlines, shall we?
Yeah.
I don't know if that was one of them, but if not, we just checked one in the box.
Well,
so there you go.
Nope, I'm gonna reread it.
Oh, there's plenty of time. Plenty of time. Elliott's headlines, ladies and gentlemen.
Score updates, breaking news, local and national headlines. Whatever's going on in the world of sports, Elliott has you covered. Off the Bench brings you Elliott's headlines.
Yeah, headlines. Woo! Woohoo! No whistle. No whistle. No whistle. Monday morning we don't whistle.
No, it's way too early.
Way too early. Headlines. College basketball from this weekend. The Bearcats. They get a big fat loss to 10th ranked Iowa State, 81-70 on the road. Jizzle James, excellent again, 25 points. He was 5 for 9 from beyond the arc. They just could not get it done down the stretch. I thought there was a chance with about 10 minutes to go they were going to win that game. But Iowa State's too good, and UC just doesn't have enough. So the Bearcats will move on.
The ref's fault.
I saw a lot of referee blaming as well, and it was a bad officiated game down the stretch. But when you get out rebounded by 30 or whatever that was, you're just not going to win many basketball games. So we move on. You move on. You got to win 5 of 6. Got to win 5 of 6. We knew that was going to be a loss. We know Houston's going to be a loss. You just got to win the other 4, and we'll see what happens. Or other 5, sorry. The Xavier Musketeers, they blew out DePaul on Saturday, 85-68. Fremantle led the way, 19 points, 9 rebounds. Swain, 17 points, 7 boards, and 8 assists as well. But Xavier gets another bounce-back win on Saturday. Utah, they upset 17th-ranked Kansas, 74-67. 15th-ranked Kentucky, the Wildcats, they lose on the road, 82-78 to Texas. Horns up for that one, I guess. 2 ranked Mississippi schools, they went at it on Saturday, and it was Mississippi State who came out on top, 81-71. And Jacobs fighting elephants?
Sure, yeah.
We'll call them the fighting elephants. Number 2, Alabama, they lose at home to Auburn, the number 1 team in the country, 94-85. It was a great game. Just didn't have enough in the tank for Alabama.
Yeah, tough one. Only home game of Nate Oates' tenure at Alabama. He's been the coach since 2019 that Alabama did not have the lead. So,
really?
Yeah, he's been a really good coach. Alabama hung in it there for a while. They went on a 13-0 run to tie it up in the middle of the second half. Mark Sears hit a 3 from about an hour away in Birmingham, and I thought at that point Auburn was dead, but Alabama just couldn't get over the hump. Auburn's a really good team. You can't win many games when you shoot. I think it was about 20% from 3. So you got to make your shots, and Bama just didn't on Sunday.
Yesterday, 9th-ranked St. John's, they hung on to beat 24th-ranked Creighton. And yesterday as well, we haven't talked about this yet, Green Bay wins their first game in 3 months against Wright State. Blew them out. Blew Wright State out of the gym, 79-68, a team that has not won a game in 3 months. But, it's always about the Horizon tournament, so the games. By the way, does that make the season easier as a Horizon League guy? Like, you just watch the whole season knowing that these games not really, in fact, not really. It's none of them matter. It's just you have to win.
Seeding.
You just have to win in the conference tournament.
Seeding, Jacob just said, like, top 4 get a first-round bye, and you get to host a quarterfinal game to get to the semifinals in Indianapolis. Top 8, they fight for a home game in the first round. You don't get a bye. If you get in the first top 8, you get a first round. So you get a home game. But then anything out of that, you're on the road the rest of the way. So there's those little things. Like Wright State's not finishing in the top 4. They're just battling to stay in the top 8 to get a first-round home game. But, yeah, that was a bad loss yesterday. That Wright State's not as bad as what their record indicates, but that was a bad loss, and there's no excusing it. So no excuses. It was a bad game. It was a horrible
bad game. It was a road game. It was a road game.
They had a kid named Tweety. I don't even know his first name. He's a freshman from Australia. He had 27 points, and I think 18 of those are from the free throw line. He got to the free throw line like 20 times. Yeah, it was it's like the weirdest thing.
Because it's a road game, does that make it a quad 1?
Oh, yeah. When you were facing, I think they have like a 330 net. I don't think that's going to qualify you for a quad 1 win.
I think Green Bay might be in their own quad.
Yeah, I think they're right. It's the first quad 5 team.
They're the only one in their quad.
Like, it was an embarrassing loss, but like, guys, when they won, they were spraying the water everywhere. They were sprinting around the floor. I thought they just won the league. And I don't know. It was kind of, but again, it's hard to talk smack when the team I'm pulling for lost yesterday. So it is what it is.
If your team doesn't win in 3 months, you can celebrate however you want. That's how I look at it.
And they did. They did.
College baseball. Bet you didn't think I would have this in the headlines. The Bearcats. They took 2 of 3 against 11th ranked Duke this weekend, and now
take that, Coach K.
That's right. And now they are ranked 25th in the country. It is the first time in program history the Bearcats baseball team is ranked.
Good for them.
So how about that? How about that for the little Bearcats?
That's fun.
NBA news. Obviously, this weekend was All-Star weekend. Mac McClung wins his 3rd straight dunk contest. Mac McClung's career earnings, $132,000. Mac McClung's dunk contest earnings, $310,000.
Yeah, they just pull him out of whatever hole he's living in every
right.
year around mid-February, have him win a dunk contest.
You want $100,000, Mac? You want it? You want it?
Yeah, sure.
Come on over. And then he plays. He plays about 1 minute in the NBA every year, but then he comes to the dunk contest and balls out. By the way, I watched the dunk contest. I haven't watched it in a long time.
Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal he was.
Jumped over a car.
Jumped over a car.
Really jumped over a car.
The rest of the guys were okay. I thought Castle was all right. The other two stunk. But, yeah, I mean, he was unbelievable. He literally didn't miss a dunk. Any of his dunks, he didn't miss one. So that kid's a superstar. Hopefully he comes back next year for 4. Team Shaq won the All-Star game, for whoever care about that. Curry wins his 2nd All-Star MVP. It was a big discussion on the broadcast because Draymond Green kept saying it's terrible, and there was people trying to defend it, and Draymond and everybody else just kept poo-pooing on it. But nonetheless, that was the All-Star game from yesterday.
Didn't work.
It
didn't work. They thought this new format might work. Did not officially. So
did not work.
Maybe we try a new format next year.
Yeah, that's right. The breaks were weird. They kept breaking in between the games for like a half hour. I'm like, what are we doing? Stop that.
It was terrible.
NHL hockey. Team USA beat Canada on Saturday 3-1. 3-1, and tonight they take on Sweden at 8 p.m. 8 p.m. tonight, the USA takes on Sweden. That game might not matter depending on what happens in Canada-Finland because they play at 1 p.m. Canada plays Finland at 1 p.m.
Big debate right now whether we should be rooting for Finland or Canada. Do you want the rematch, or do you want to keep the hardest team out of the championship and give USA a better nod on Thursday night? I want to play Canada again, personally. I think that was a lot of fun on Saturday night, and I would love to see them again.
So are we out? We're out on booing the national anthem, or are we in on booing the national anthem?
I'm in on booing the national anthem. I love hate in sports. I think hate's a lot of fun, and I'm excited to boo Canada's national anthem to high heaven on Thursday night. So I have no problem with them booing the anthem. They booed the anthem. The Chuck brothers decided to fight them in the first 9 seconds of the game, and that's exactly how it should be handled. So yeah, if you boo the anthem and you want to face the repercussions for it, which is taking a knuckle sandwich 3 seconds into the game and losing on your home ice, that's fine by me.
Oh, Canada. NFL news.
There we go.
NFL
there
news.
We go.
Jonathan Martin, and those who remember that name, remember a story that happened about 10 years ago. Jonathan Martin has walked back the bullying scandal that took over the NFL for a little bit there. Quote, I never believed for a second I was being bullied. Quote, it's a story I've been trying to fix for 10 years. So this scandal rocked. It was Richie Incognito, who's the guy that was pretty much the face of it, and he went on a Twitter tirade yesterday about how he's been saying this for 10 years, about how he was innocent, and it looks like that Jonathan Martin just confirmed it. I don't know why it took 10 years for him to say anything about it. I have to read a little bit more into this because it seems pretty terrible to wait 10 years to say this. I mean, maybe he's been saying it the whole time and nobody's listened, but I mean, it's pretty wild to me how it's taken 10 years to free my guy, Richie Incognito. I guess he's not my guy. I don't think he's a great guy.
How Schefter broke this news was a little bit particular as well. He just posted a screenshot of the article with the quotes in it and with the tweet, an excerpt from whatever the guy's name is, statement. And Richie Incognito replied to that and said, it's a little bit more than an excerpt if you spent, part of the last 10 years trying to ruin my life for this story, and then it gets absolved and you just, post a screenshot. It's the throwaway tweet on a Sunday afternoon. So I thought that was a little bit interesting. I think, you should always have the same, be as loud as you were with the accusations, with the proof that it's not true when that inevitably comes out.
Those are your headlines.
All right, Elliott's headlines. That's how we kick off the show here today on a Monday. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. We'll step away for a few moments. LeBron did something yesterday that kind of ticked everybody off. I'm curious your thoughts. Did he do anything wrong? We'll discuss when we come back. More Off the Bench next. All right, we welcome you back off the bench. Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, Elliott Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here on a Monday. Last night, NBA All-Star Game. I laugh because they build up the All-Star Game every year just so we can get to the All-Star Game and just so everyone can literally dunk on it. No pun intended. But one of the bigger headlines from last night, outside of just, of course, all the negativity that surrounded the All-Star event, LeBron James, his 20 straight years in the NBA All-Star Game streak came to an end over the weekend, although I still think he's going to be labeled an All-Star this year. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
I don't really know what to make of this. I see it was made a big deal about LeBron taking a spot from somebody else. A lot of times, like Anthony Davis, for instance, should have been an NBA All-Star, but because he's injured, he was not an All-Star this season, and they ended up the reserve replacement, of course, was Trae Young for Anthony Davis. That's what happens when you get hurt. There's usually someone that comes in to replace you so they can get that All-Star opportunity. LeBron James arrived. He didn't show up for All-Star events over the weekend. He showed up about an hour and a half before the All-Star game on Sunday, and then made it be known during the media press conference before. They asked what to expect of LeBron during the game that night, and he said, "Oh, you could expect nothing. I'm actually not playing tonight. I'm my ankle. I got this bum ankle." And then, of course, it took off from there. Everyone upset because LeBron probably knew. How long did he know he wasn't going to play? He stole the spotlight from somebody else. A lot of people upset with LeBron. Do you have a problem with LeBron waiting until an hour and a half before the All-Star game to announce that, yeah, he's not even going to participate at all?
I'll never have a problem with anything LeBron does. So, yeah, it's fine.
Honest.
No, yeah, I wish he wouldn't have. Certainly not great to, opt out. I have no problem if he doesn't want to play in the All-Star game. We know what the All-Star game has become. If he wants to use the week off to rest, then that's completely fine with me. I would have liked him to not do it on Sunday afternoon. I think if you know you're not going to play, which I have a hard time, he came to this realization on Sunday at noon. I think you should have done it earlier, gotten a replacement in there. It means a lot, obviously, for LeBron to be a 21st time All-Star, but it means a lot to everyone else too to get into that game, even though the actual game doesn't mean a whole lot. Getting an All-Star nod does. So I think he should have said it earlier and given another guy a chance to get in there, but it is what it is. Who cares about this All-Star game anyway? So who cares? I
think the format probably swayed him to not play as well. I think the players unanimously hate it. I don't think one of the players said anything nice. I'll have to go back and find it. Whether it was the breaks in between or the tournament style itself, I don't think anybody liked this.
Yeah.
Put it away. Never use it again. I have no issue with a player not playing in the All-Star game.
Players did say post-All-Star game, that post-round-robin tournament, whatever it was, that they would be for the world versus U.S. model that some people were throwing out after the success of the Four Nations so far. Obviously, that was the replacement for NHL All-Star, so people are saying maybe that works for NBA. We saw these guys take the Olympics very seriously. Obviously, a made-up tournament in the middle of February is not the same as the Olympics, but the Four Nations isn't the same as the Olympics, and those guys are fighting in the first 9 seconds. Now, I'm not saying they're going to take it that seriously, but could they, if they're wearing USA, take it a little bit more seriously than everything else? I don't know. Maybe that's a solution that could potentially fix this, but they've tried everything now, and the only time they ever had success was the Elam ending the year after Kobe died, where everyone really went really hard in that game, and it really turned out to be a great game, but the next year when they did that format again, it was just absolutely terrible, and then obviously this one didn't work out last night.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a right answer for it, to be quite honest. It's just the players have to try, and if you're not going to try. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you watched the skills competition. Very, very funny, but it was just like people were complaining about the All-Stars not trying, and then you look at CP3 and Wemby just absolutely making a mockery of the whole skills challenge. They did get disqualified, but it was...
That was BS.
They get disqualified?
Yeah!
I mean, it's a little bit...
They followed the rules!
They did. It's. I mean, it was terrible rules by the NBA. It was
bad rules.
But it is funny to see how, the NBA just... The All-Star weekend has lost its luster. We'll see if they can get it back. I imagine they will eventually. It's just... They're on a bad spell right now.
Ja Morant did tweet after the dunk contest, Mac might make me want to dunk again, with Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon tagged as well, so... Maybe if they're mad about G League guys winning their dunk contest, they'll start to dunk again, that being stars. So that'd be more fun.
That's right.
Maybe that's how you can save it.
It would be. Kenner, are you a big NASCAR guy?
No, real quick, before we go to NASCAR, just on that, you mentioned Josh saying that Giannis, too, re-quoted that or, quote, X'd it, tweeted it, whatever, saying that if he's in, then he's in too. Like if Ja will do it, then Giannis will do it too. I think that's how you do it. And everyone keeps saying, well, I don't know what the solution is to fix the All-Star game. It's very simple. Just have it be like it was for generations and generations, decades and decades. And the way you fix it is the athletes just decide to care. By the way, I do like the solution that Jake, I know you like that one too. Again, them against the world and all that fun stuff. Yeah. But at the end of the day, what works is the East versus the West. Guys wear the same jersey. They wear their team jersey like they used to do in the All-Star game. It just brought a different, like baseball's going back to that for their All-Star game this year, which I'm excited about that. But I think that we're making this too difficult. Like I think the NBA All-Star game is a joke. I think it used to be the number one All-Star game in all of sports. I think it's the biggest joke now. It's a laughingstock. Literally, this is how bad it has gotten. WNBA players are asked to participate in the three-point contest. WNBA players are saying, nah, we're good. All right, Caitlin Clark turned it down, and Ionescu turned it down as well. Both said, no, we're good. So you have WNBA players turning down your All-Star weekend. You have G League players, not even professional NBA basketball players, winning your dunk contest because your All-Stars don't want anything to do with it. And, your players, you keep trying to change the format every year to find a way to get them to play and try hard, and they just refuse to try hard. The NBA... what a joke that All-Star weekend is. Like, I have no clue. And people spend so much money on these tickets just to be a part of some kind of joke every single year. I hate the All-Star weekend that it has become because it used to be cool. I always loved the All-Star weekend growing up, and now it's just a joke. It's not even worth my time watching. I tuned in last night trying to figure out what the hell I was watching. It was, no time. It was just the first to 40. It was a little tournament style thing, and no one was even trying. It's the same thing every single season, regardless of the format. It's a joke. I'm over it. Simple as that.
I had the over, and the game just ended. It's like that's tough.
I didn't even realize it was done.
What's the over?
The over was like 72.5 in a first to 40 game.
I see.
And then it just ended.
I see. Yeah, I don't have too much to add. We know what the NBA All-Star game is at this point. It's just they'll try to fix it next year. They'll change it up.
NBA and MLB have the most pressure to have a reasonable All-Star game because their finals aren't at a set location.
Yeah.
Like the NFL has their Super Bowl week where everyone, gets together and does everything because where the location is going to be, and that's where, they have league meetings and everything like that. MLB, obviously, with their draft during the All-Star week and NBA, it's the only time in the calendar where where the league's going to be and everyone's in the same city and everything like that. So those two leagues, obviously baseball had it for a long time where they had it right, and we don't know where it's necessarily heading now, but basketball has had it wrong for a long time, and I think there's a lot of pressure on both those leagues to fix it more so than the NFL because they always have Super Bowl to fall back on.
Yeah.
Draymond was dunking on it all night, and then my favorite part of the night was when Charles Barkley looked at him and he goes, what do you – like it's your generation killed the All-Star game.
Right.
He's like it's your era of players that killed this All-Star game. So you don't get to complain about it. Like this is your fault. Draymond has participated in All-Star games where he was giving the same amount or less amount of effort than everybody else. So he's to blame. They're all to blame. They killed the All-Star game, and it'll be, we'll see which group of guys comes in to resurrect it or whatever. But I have no interest in it moving forward. However, I will say if Ja and Giannis and big names like that are in the dunk contest, moving forward, I'm all in. I will tune back in at least for that. But I have no interest in the All-Star game itself. I think it's the worst one in sports at this point. I'll watch the Pro Bowl. I'll watch the Pro Bowl and the.
No, you won't.
No, I would.
The flag football. You're gonna watch
the Pro Bowl games are way more entertaining.
Oh, the flag football.
Yes.
No, the flag football game stinks.
I think. And at least football said rather than continuing to throw out a pointless Pro Bowl game every year where no one's tackling and no one's trying, I do find that the athletes are at least trying to make the best of this flag football game or whatever. I at least find more entertainment in that than this NBA All-Star game. But either way. So you brought up the Daytona.
The Daytona 500. You watch any of the Daytona? I know it was probably a late day for you yesterday, so probably not. But the Daytona, I don't think it got started till very late. There was some rain delay issues. And at the end of the race, it was William Byron, who a lot of NASCAR fans I see is the luckiest guy on the planet. Okay. I watched the last, few 50, 100 laps. I don't know how many laps I watched. But it got to the end. This guy was in 9th place up until the final wreck of the race, and somehow he just won it. He just wins it in overtime, and he wins back-to-back Daytona 500s. William Byron, so good for him. I thought it was fun. There was a big wreck right before that, kind of sent him to overtime. There was cars flying in the air, and I always wonder how, if I were a NASCAR driver. How do you handle being literally floating in the air while your car flips and turns and hits walls? It's the scariest thing I've ever seen.
they're probably like they're hunkered in more than, it's not like just our casual vehicles, flipping on the highway a little bit, right? Like, by the way, not saying it's not scary or terrifying or anything, but
yeah.
I
feel like it would still be pretty nerve-wracking.
Oh no, it's terrifying. Yeah. It's terrifying. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like, they're pretty at least hunkered in to where one little strap that we just lightly click for those who wear seatbelts. Like, I was gonna say sometimes. By the way, I don't like the Daytona. I've never sat down to watch it. I'm not a big guy. Do you guys watch it? Like, when you guys have time, is that something that interests you every year or no?
I went to Talladega once in college, and that is the extent of NASCAR viewing, and watching the race was like 10th on the list of things we did there. So, yeah, other than in-person NASCAR, I definitely haven't watched it on TV, but they're fun events.
I never grew up in a family that watched it, so I never really watched it. If I'm out somewhere and they have it on, like I'm gonna pay attention to it a little bit. I have no issue against it. I really don't know the rules, and that's my fault. Yeah. But I just don't understand it.
They just
Yeah, the overtime yesterday I didn't get. Mouse Cop was trying to explain it to me in the chat. It was just I guess you have to have a full lap. You can't end it on a wreck, I guess is how it works. So you got to come back out there and do it again. But it was cool. I liked it. Everett wanted me to mention this as well. The Genesis Open, Ludwig Oberg. I forget Oberg. He won the Genesis Open in golf. So how about that? Another big event.
Busy weekend.
Nobody really watched.
ESPN had he had a hole-in-one, and ESPN had his hole-in-one at number 9 on the top 10, and number 1 was a lacrosse goal.
Hell yeah!
So that stunk.
Hell yeah!
For people that are still pro ESPN.
That shows you the weekend in sports.
It was rough.
Oofa. All right, let's talk a little Cincinnati Reds when we come back. Our guy Charlie Goldsmith, he's covering spring training now. So now we're actually getting good spring training coverage. Of course, now spring training is technically underway now. So that kind of helps too. But some interesting nuggets and notes coming out of the early goings of spring training. A couple interesting takeaways from Charlie Goldsmith's early reporting of camp. We'll get to that when we come back. More Off the Bench when we return. All right, and we are back off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Earlier, Elliott, you brought up the Bearcats baseball.
Oh, yeah.
Collins cracking the top 25. I saw this yesterday, Indiana State. I was just kind of scrolling through. At one point, it was 35-1 in the fifth inning. And the final score in this matchup, Indiana State
put up 30 runs.
Yeah.
What was it? What was the final?
It was so Jacob talked about that comeback again. It was 35-1 at one point in the fifth inning. But then I don't even know who this team is that they're playing. Gastonia. I'm not sure. But Gastonia just goes on this crazy run, and they end up outscoring Indiana State 5-1 the rest of the way. So they lose a respectable 36-6 ball game. So there you go. It was Wagner that they played in Gastonia. But, yeah, they played Wagner, 36-6.
College baseball is, especially right now, out of conference games, there's some crazy scores. I mean, just some absolutely crazy games going on. Just pure domination coast to coast in some of these schools. And it's fun to watch. Opening day was fun.
Xavier Baseball is 2-1, by the way. If that was for Mousecap. He was going to keep saying it in the chat. Xavier Baseball 2-1. I don't know what event they were playing. I just looked. They played 3 different teams in Arizona, so I don't know what they got going on there. But they're 2-1. Shout out Xavier Baseball. College baseball is weird. College baseball because there's no mercy rule, right, Casey? There's no mercy rule in college baseball, or is there mercy rule?
That's a good question. I'm gonna have to refresh.
There's not.
On that.
There's
not.
There is
no mercy rule.
No, because and that's the worst too. Like I've worked conference conference tournaments.
Conference play. There's no mercy rule. Outside of conference play, I believe there is mercy rule.
Okay.
So I've worked conference tournaments before where it's like obviously it's the double elimination for some of these tournaments, and a lot of times like if you get that first win in that second game, you're not throwing your best pitchers and stuff out there. So you're getting a lot of, average to bad pitching against good hitting. So the game just keeps going and going and going and going. Like it needs a mercy rule. I would plead for one when I have to work those events, but either way. But yeah, no mercy rule as we saw yesterday. What's that?
I was just saying, Reed says it depends on the league. So it could be, it varies on the league. But I guess wherever the hell they were playing, 35-1, my God. At what point? What's your mindset down 35-1? We're just all here to have a good time.
Well, I mean, when you're on a 5-1 run, you're gonna think maybe
we can
come back.
We can do it. Did you see? Also, this is kind of a crazy show. Did you see the kid? Was it Wofford? The kid from Wofford who started shooting granny style free throws.
Yes.
He was a 30
squeezes in front first and then flips it.
He was a 30% free throw shooter. He switched to granny, and since that he's been like a 60% free throw shooter. So. Unbelievable that technique is still used.
Courtesy to our guy. Sorry, go ahead, Kenner.
I was going to say, don't tell Doug Gottlieb. He loves to make fun of people's percentage. So,
courtesy of our guy Craig with another baseball score. He said, "Look up the Rhode Island William and Mary score." I said, "Okay, Craig, whatever you say." Rhode Island 36 runs to William and Mary's 22.
Oh my God!
Just a clean 58-run baseball game.
They got a timer on that game.
I'm not seeing a timer. Yes, 4.5 hours.
Only 4.5 hours.
That's what it's saying.
When Chatterbox did our event, when we worked at the Joe Nuxall Classic, when we worked that game, unbelievable game. I will never experience a game, and it was cold outside. It was fantastic. Windy. Prasco rocks because Prasco's got the free hot dogs. I just house 10 of those free hot dogs. But like during the game, like it was I don't know. I'll never know the final score. I think it was like 50-40, the final score. Was that Wright State, actually? That might have been Wright State. I don't know who was
Wright State. I think it was Wright State in Cincinnati.
Maybe.
That's right.
Super high schooling game, and it just kept going and going and going. Because, they don't use – a lot of times in these types of matchups as well, especially in the middle of the week, they're not using their top pitchers, and they're not playing a lot of their top players. So a lot of that gets a little dicey and ugly at times, and that was one of those. That was just never ending. So
Unreal.
Craig said it was only 4.5 hours because it was only 7 innings long.
Wow.
That's just absolutely crazy.
Big 17-run top of the fifth for Rhode Island.
But speaking of baseball, Justin.
There we go. That's a segue.
That was very smooth. I like it. But let's talk a little Cincinnati Reds. Spring training action, I think, Friday? I think it's the first spring training game for the Reds. They play the old Guards.
Yes.
Coming up, the matchup we've all been waiting for. It sounds there's a lot of positivity out of camp right now. If you remember a year ago, this is right when we started hearing the Matt McClain news. This is when we started, really hearing, starting to doubt, what was about to happen with Noelvi Marte. Like we weren't sure what was going on there. There was just a lot of bad news that was just constantly coming out, and all the positivity and optimism that we had for the Reds heading into spring training was it evaporated quickly in that very first week of camp. That doesn't seem to be the case right now. You're hearing of all these guys that are showing up in the best shape of their careers. Nick Lodolo apparently in the best shape of his career. We're seeing all these guys come in, 20, 30 pounds, less than what they were a year ago. Like these guys are ready to rock. It sounds like, again, maybe I'm falling for all the, positive propaganda or whatever, but I think this organization and fan base needs it at this point. how we feeling early on, just about the vibes. Before we get to some of the storylines, vibes is very key when it comes to this Reds team, of course. Vibes seem pretty good in the first couple of days, right? Like, that's always a good takeaway, especially after we heard the Rhett Lauder news right away. I was like, oh, here we go. The Spencer Steer thing kind of had people, wondering. It just seems like all of those were a little, overblown a little bit. It sounds like this team, all positivity coming out of the early goings of camp.
The only thing that's going to kill my vibe during spring training is an injury. So I'm feeling good so far. Obviously, the Steer Lauder news to kick off spring training, but it doesn't seem like either of those are massive concerns. So, yeah, my vibes are still high. I'm very optimistic going into opening day. I've said it for a while. I'm feeling real good about this potentially being a playoff team, or at least fighting for it, giving us a really fun summer if we're able to stay healthy and keep the guys that are supposed to be out there. So that's obviously the biggest concern. We dealt with it last year, and as of February 17th, seems like we're sitting pretty. So hopefully, fingers crossed and prayers up that it stays that way as we near opening day.
Last year's team was really bad, and just because of the injuries, and they were never healthy, and everything that happened last year. Like, they weren't a good team. And they still won 70-something games. Like, there's going to be significant improvement this year. I don't know if it's a playoff team yet. I mean, we'll have to see. But I would bet a lot of money that they cash their over in the win total, 78.5. I think they're going to win 80-something games. It might not be enough to make the playoffs, but like I said, there's going to be improvement just because I think the talent's there. They predicted, or the MLB predicted a opening day lineup and opening day starting five. Mm-hmm. Down the order, it's Matt McClain leading off, Ellie 2, Tyler 3, Spencer 4, Jamier 5, TJ 6, Gavin Lux 7, Austin Hayes 8, Jake Fraley 9. In the starting five, Hunter Green, Brady Singer, Martinez, Lodolo, and Rhett Lauder actually was predicted. Like, if you go on that prediction, Andrew Abbott not even mentioned. So it's like, I love where we're at this very second. Yeah. Like Jacob said, it can take a turn for the worse very quickly. It takes one injury to one of our stars, and we're done. It's over. Because they can't overcome that. We're not the Dodgers. You're not the Yankees. We're not the Cubs. We don't have depth. There's no depth. So if you lose Matt McClain, you lose Ellie De La Cruz, you can't come back from that. You just can't.
Right.
The good players on this team have to be healthy and they have to be good. That's just the fact of what it is. Like CES wasn't even on that projected lineup. That's what we're dealing with now. We've got a lot of guys that are able to compete at a high level. And as long as they're healthy, and you have to keep saying it, it's going to be the biggest storyline ever, is can this team be healthy? Because if they're able to be healthy, I'm telling you right now, they're going to make the playoffs. As long as there's not a significant injury to this roster, they will make the postseason. And I firmly believe it. I say they're a borderline playoff team, assuming that something goes bad. So I assume the worst. But again, I like the way it looks right now. I know people are going to be upset with the no power bat in the outfield. I understand that I understand that frustration. But besides that, I think the bullpen's better. I think the starting five is going to be great this year, and I'm ready to roll. So to answer your question, yeah, my vibes are high. I'm ready to roll.
So we mentioned the Rhett Lauder thing just a few moments ago. Of course, that was something that came out last week. That again, they were going to kind of restrict his throwing program a little bit as he experienced a little soreness on literally the very first day of pitchers and catchers reporting to Goodyear. But Charlie Goldsmith tweeted out yesterday that Rhett Lauder, he will begin his throwing progression tomorrow, which is today. So Rhett Lauder is going to be right out there today again. And obviously you hope that at the end of today, when he is done with his, throwing program, that, he doesn't still experience some of that pain in that elbow, something that we will keep an eye on. But cool thing is Charlie Goldsmith back at spring training, covering the Reds, and I think that he's one of the best in the game, and I'm looking forward to following his coverage throughout. But he put out a couple of keynotes right off.
12 hours, and the content has already skyrocketed.
Yes,
I mean, it's ridiculous, and shout out to Charlie. He comes on the program, and he's absolutely amazing at what he does.
It's a shame that a certain Enquirer didn't want to bring that back.
Certain Enquirer.
because
I wonder which Enquirer. I wonder which one you're talking about.
It's a shame because because Charlie's the best and all of his stuff's the best. And that's when spring training starts, is when Charlie's out there. So
a certain Enquirer.
I thought you'd like that.
Of all the Enquirers, I just hope that the one you're talking about doesn't crack the code and figure out that you're talking about them. I'm fingers crossed. But no, so
they're too busy at Royals camp.
Yeah.
Are they?
Still interviewing Royals players.
Yes, a couple updates that Charlie Goldsmith put out yesterday, and he says some updates from Terry Francona after, of course, you said Charlie's there 12 hours already hanging out with Terry Francona, getting the latest. Matt McLain will be focusing on second base. No surprise there.
Good.
He could take some ground balls at shortstop, but second base will be his focus. The reason that is key, because I saw someone tweet underneath it, like, well, why is that news? Matt McLain's a second baseman. There was a lot of talk all offseason that, he was bouncing around and, in the outfield a lot. And a lot of people were wondering, okay, is that going to be something that they kind of tinker with a little bit? But to hear Terry Francona come out and confirm with Charlie Goldsmith that Matt McLain will be focusing on second base, he'll take some ground balls at shortstop, but second is going to be his focus. I think that's a big takeaway right off the bat as well, because you know who your shortstop is in Elliott, and Matt McLain's your second baseman, starting to get some of those positions locked down as far as knowing who certain guys are and positions are. I think that's key. We now kind of get a little confirmation about that with Matt McLain.
I like a lot of the noise that Ellie should not be the shortstop. Just doesn't seem to be seeping into the clubhouse whatsoever.
No.
We haven't heard a single nugget from anyone that's in charge of making a decision like that he could not be playing shortstop. So that's my biggest takeaway as we continue moving through this. As much as fans keep saying, try him at third, try him in the outfield, move Gavin Lux to second, whatever else they think they can fix the Reds with. No one in that organization thinks Ellie's going to be anywhere but short, and that's really important to me as well, because you're telling a young kid in the third year of his career that you believe in him at the most valuable position. And I think that also helps Matt McLain in telling him, you're going to be our second baseman every day. Get comfortable there. That's your job. So, it goes back to the conversation we had when we signed Gavin Lux. I think when you have guys that you have faith in can be stars, there's a benefit to locking them in a spot instead of just moving them around. And obviously, as you said, McLain still takes some ground balls in short, so when Ellie has off days, we'll be able to cycle through the infield and still not lose very much in terms of defense up the middle, which will be great to have. And yeah, I think this is all encouraging news. And the second part of that was that Lux will primarily be playing second and third in camp and not trying the outfield yet.
Yeah, I never understood the fascination with sending guys into the outfield that don't play the outfield position.
Right.
I've never understood it. I don't like it. And the fact that, these conversations, well, Ellie's got a great arm. Ellie, don't get me wrong. Ellie would be the best outfielder in Major League Baseball. You put him in center field, he's a superstar.
Yeah.
He is mowing down anybody from deep in the outfield grass. I have no doubt in my mind. Matt McLain, phenomenal defender. You put him in right field, he's going to do a great job. He's going to be one of the best right fielders in the game. I don't understand why that it's such a fascination that we need to try to move people and just see what we can do. If we put them there, then it's going to open up 2 more spots in our infield. They're really good at the spots that they're in. I don't want to move it. And to be quite honest, we talk about health nonstop. I'm not willing to move one of those guys to the outfield and risk injury. That's where all the injuries happen, is out in the outfield. I know there's injuries that happen in the infield as well, but I would venture to say there's a hell of a lot more that happen out in the outfield grass than the infield dirt. So I'm going to take my guys. I'm going to leave him in the infield. I love the fact that Matt McLain's staying at second base. Don't move him. If he has to play short when Elliott gets an off day, great. Other than that, he's my second baseman, and he should be going forward.
Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410. Wingham and Dayton. All right, we'll step away for a few moments, pick up with more Reds talk. You guys talked about Gavin Lux, Candelario, Francona very high on Candelario right now as well. We'll talk about the impact that he can have if he has the season that we were hoping that he would have had last year. So we'll pick up with more Reds talk when we return. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. All right, and we are back. Justin Kenner, Casey McAllister, Elliott Ruhr, and Jacob Tissett with you here. 1410 ESPN Radio in Dayton, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. Talking Reds. Again, Charlie Goldsmith put out a lot of talking points from Reds camp early. And we, of course, talked about Matt McClain. It wasn't a question mark, but it was more curiosity. Like, I think Matt McClain was always going to be the Reds' second baseman, but I think we were kind of curious, how much of the noise from the offseason where there was a lot of talks of potentially, getting him some time in the outfield, how much of that would have played a role in his usage throughout the upcoming season. Matt McClain will be focusing on second base. He could take some ground balls at shortstop, but second is his primary focus, and this is according to, of course, Terry Francona. So we talked about that. Gavin Lux, as Jacob talked about a little bit ago as well, another update from Charlie Goldsmith regarding his conversation with Terry Francona. Gavin Lux will likely play second and third early in camp. At first, they'll look at him there, and they will not add outfield. Of course, Gavin Lux being brought in just to, again, the versatility that he brings to the table, of course, being able to play middle infield. And although there's guys that you have set or that you're primarily looking at, second baseman, shortstop, third base, this, that, and the other, we thought we had it all figured out last year and then realized, we're actually not as deep in middle infield as what we thought. So I think having a guy that could play second, short, and third is going to be key for Lux as he kind of bounces around a bit. But if we know that McClain's your second baseman, you obviously know that Ellie's your shortstop. Third base seems to be the big question mark at this point. Noelvi Marte, who we've talked a lot about, not always in the way that we had anticipated or hoped, not a whole lot of positivity coming out from any updates when it comes to him. But Candelario is another name to keep an eye on as well, because Terry Francona praised Candelario for how he looks heading into camp. But one of the best, said the best shape he's been in his career, which is good for Candelario's bid to play third base. So if Matt McClain's at second, and of course you have Elliott short, and if Candelario's at third, where does Gavin Lux fit in to the mix here? Because I know they said they're not even looking to put him in the outfield, but will that be the spot that they have to look at some point? What if there is a logjam in middle infield, which is a good problem to have considering what we saw last year?
Yeah, I mean, Gavin Lux is a guy that I did not think, and I still don't really think, is going to be a massive difference maker for this team. I could be wrong. I like Gavin Lux, but I don't think he should be like someone you're relying upon to bring in 100 runs, some guy that you're relying upon to be an everyday player. Like, this is a guy that's going to fill in spots when he's needed, and that's why you bring him here. He's a utility guy. He'll play every position in the infield, and I imagine they're going to force him out in the outfield as well. So he's going to play everywhere. You're going to see him everywhere. I don't think he's going to be an everyday starter. I can't imagine that's going to be the case. So I thought that when they signed him. I didn't like that's just not a guy that you start right there at first base or shortstop or third base. It's just not a guy you start. Now I could be wrong on that. Like, an injury happens and he takes over a spot, and that's his spot for the rest of the year. Kind of the way it happened last year with Jonathan India. A lot of people thought Indy was going out to the outfield. Well, no, Matt McClain. Indy just goes back to second. So if there's another injury situation, that's where Lux will take over. I think Lux is going to be an important piece. I just don't think he's going to be the most important piece, not by a long shot.
Yeah, we traded Jonathan India for Brady Singer, which greatly improved our rotation. Then we traded next to nothing for Gavin Lux, who's a marginally better Jonathan India for that utility role off the bench. I don't think Gavin Lux is going to be an everyday player. I think Elliott's absolutely right. I made a jump the gun a little bit mentally on the whole right field thing, outfield thing. As soon as we made the trade, I think everyone got pretty optimistic on that right away. But it doesn't seem like he's going to be an everyday guy, and I think that's okay. To have Gavin Lux coming off the bench and have that considerable depth in the middle infield in case one of those injuries happen, you can stay above water for a few games or a month or whatever it is, as long as it's not something that's super significant and keeps the guy out for a long time. A player like Gavin Lux on your bench can absolutely keep you afloat. And if Jeimer Candelario, if his injuries start acting up again and he can't play defensively, he gives you the ability to play him at DH and play Lux at third. And you don't have to put as much on Noelvi Marte's plate, when I don't think anyone in this organization or fans of it have a lot of faith in him going into this season. So I think it gives you a little bit longer leash, which with a lot of stuff in terms of staying competitive this year across the infield and up and down your lineup. But yeah, maybe he, shines in the infield and they move him to the outfield later in spring training and he looks great out there too, and we get really lucky and have an everyday guy. But if he's not, I still think he can be an absolutely crucial piece to this team when it comes to winning games and, staying in the mix when it comes, down the line when guys are banged up.
Yeah, and to be able to, and again, having depth, having guys, on that bench that could play multiple spots in the infield. This is where I don't mind having, like, when you go sign guys that can play multiple positions, I don't mind that as long as you're not like signing Gavin Lux to say, hey, this is our one of our starting middle infielders moving forward. I don't get all the butterflies inside for that, because as I've said before, do you want a guy that can specifically play third base and is not very good at other positions, but he's an elite third baseman, or do you want a guy that could be an average second baseman, shortstop, and third baseman? Obviously, you see the value for a team that doesn't spend a lot of money like the Reds to see more value in a Gavin Lux than going all out, all in, if you will, to spend on an expensive third baseman or any other position player in the middle infield. I get both sides to that equation. Gavin Lux, though, because he's not going to be a primary everyday player, I think does check off a lot of boxes because of that and the value he brings to the table. And then Noelvi Marte, let's just say that, okay, he does have a good spring training and everything is clicking and it's rolling for him. That's another piece inside, because, again, you have Matt McClain who could play second base or short. You have, obviously, Lux who could play second, short, or third in that situation. You have Candelario at third. You have Noelvi Marte at third. Like, you have a lot of options now in that middle infield to move pieces around, obviously with different lineups. If injuries occur, you need to give, Elly De La Cruz that rare off day, and you hope it's not often, but know that it's needed throughout. They're going to have options. They didn't have a lot of options last year. They're going to have options this year. Again, assuming everyone's healthy, I feel pretty good about the way things are shaking up early. But again, we just got to hope that no bad news comes out of camp, because if no bad news comes out of camp, I like the makeup of this roster to put them in position to be competitive all season and fight for a playoff spot when it's all said and done.
Someone in the chat mentions nobody's really even talked about Noelvi. Noelvi shouldn't be talked about as of this very second. I don't, like Jacob said, I mean, this isn't a guy that you have a lot of optimism is going to be a game changer this year. But I will say this, if he does turn out to be the player he was from a while ago, what was it, 2 years ago now?
Yeah.
If he turns out to be that player, then this is a completely different story. This team is going to exceed all of our expectations if that's the case. So I'm cheering for him, I'm rooting for him. It's just a little bit silly to expect anything from Noelvi Marte when last year you saw what he was, and what he was a truly horrific baseball player. If he can get back to where he was before the juice, great. I'm happy for him. I'd love it. But again, I don't trust him right now.
He won't be on the opening day roster, right?
Depends how he does this spring. He played bad during the winter. He's played bad during the spring. He's played bad for almost a year and a half straight since the juice. So I don't know how he's just going to improve in a 30 game stretch or 30-day stretch in March. I could be wrong on that, and I hope I am.
I also don't know with what we saw last year, is a good spring training enough for him to earn a roster spot? Or should he have to go down to AAA and show that he can hit consistently for a little bit?
I mean, if he's tearing,
we have bodies.
Yeah, no. If he's tearing the cover off the ball, I don't see a reason for him not to be on the roster. I mean,
he'd have to be playing like he was playing when he came up 2 years ago. It's not just like he looks okay, he's on the roster. That's more what I mean.
Yeah, you're right.
Last week when Reed filled in, I know he put out his top 5 most important players for the Reds, and Jeimer Candelario obviously coming on that list. I think he came in at number 4 on his list. Where do you rank Candelario as far as one of the most important Reds for this upcoming season? How high up that list do you rank him when it comes to Candelario?
Pretty high. He is that big signing that we've wanted for a while. They went out and got him last year. I think it's $15 million a year, and that's big money for the Reds in free agency. So if he can go be that player we brought him in to be last year, that'll be absolutely crucial for the Reds. If he can play third base every day and be a 30 home run guy, that'd be absolutely awesome for the Reds. Now, if he's not going to stay healthy, then you have to start looking at guys like Gavin Lux and if Noelvi Marte can come on, and that puts the Reds in a tough spot. And if he can't run again and you have to DH him every day, that continues to put the Reds in a tough spot. So I think Jeimer Candelario staying healthy and playing up to what he was supposed to be in Cincinnati is, if not the most important, certainly up there for the Reds' success this year.
Last year was the worst, and by far, by the way, it was the worst season of his major league career. His career started in 2016 with the Cubs. Since then, he's been a pretty solid baseball player. Last year, disaster, a lot because of the injury. So I'm going to say that if he's able to replicate some of those years with Detroit, then I'm going to love our chances, because I think that he has the ability to hit home runs. He hit 20 home runs in 112 games last year, 56 RBIs. I think the guy's good. He has to get on base. I mean, a 279 OBP is woeful.
Yeah.
But if he gets on base, if he's able to show a little bit of power, if he's able to be that power bat that we're all looking for, then great. Yeah, I think he's one of the more important pieces too. Every player has, and this is just pretty much based on the fact that we don't have any room for error here. Every player is very important. Like, there's not a player that we can just skate by with having a so-so player. Spencer Steer has to be the guy that we've seen the past few years. If this injury carries into the season and he's not good offensively whatsoever, he can't be on the roster. Like, that's just the nature of this right now. The right field position's the only thing where I have serious doubts about what's going on out there. And maybe Austin Hayes can clean it up. Maybe Jake Fraley's going to be that guy that I believe in. I think Jake Fraley's that guy. Maybe Will Benson's back. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be. But Jeimer Candelario is a guy is he the highest paid player on the team? Second highest paid player?
Certainly close.
Behind Nick Martinez. So, yeah, he's vital. He's vital to the team.
Yeah, I think he's very vital, and that's why I brought this up, because if he has the season that we anticipated him to have last year, and obviously coming into camp, obviously in very good shape, and Francona seems very high on him right now in the early goings as well. If we get stability, obviously you know who you have in McLean and Elliott at second and short. Christian Encarnacion, Strand, not concerned, but still need to see more proof and evidence that he's going to be a stable force at first base. If the Reds can get some consistency and stability at the corners in the infield, I think that's ginormous, because then it closes some things off. You know who your first baseman is. You're getting production from him, obviously production from your third baseman, and Candelario. I think Candelario solves a lot of problems for this team, because you know who your second baseman is and shortstop is, obviously, but at third base, if they can securely know that he is their guy, that is their third baseman. Now we're not talking as much about Noelvi Marte. Now we're just talking about the usage of Lux and others as far as depth is concerned, and just maneuvering the lineup a little bit. I think once the Reds start to check off boxes of getting answers as far as who their stable guys are, if Candelario's that with Elliott and McLean, obviously Tyler Stevenson's your catcher, so you're locked in there. Like, I think they just need to get more locked-in pieces, and I think he's the key to that. I put him very high up on that list, because if he's not very good and he is questionable, it's just now we're having way too many questions about multiple positions, and I think it's going to be hard to win the division or compete for the playoffs if you have way too many holes in that middle infield. And I think if he has a big year and he's their guy, that checks off a lot of boxes and provides that stability that this team desperately needs. So I think that's going to be key as well.
I think, as you said right there, if the better Jeimer Candelario is, the less people are talking about Noelvi Marte, and that gives him a much better chance to succeed without a magnifying glass on him. And however good Jeimer's going to be this year, the best chance for the Reds to have long-term success is for Noelvi Marte to figure it out. So if Jeimer can be good this year and Noelvi can, go on the back burner and figure some things out on his own and be ready to go, maybe next year or even later in this year, if this team is a playoff team, if he's ready to go by, September, and we're calling him up for a playoff run, and he's back to at least a form of his old self, that's another huge positive that you can get from Candelario being great. So the ripple effects of the guys that are supposed to be good being good this year go all the way down throughout the Reds organization. And I think it could really help this team long term if the guys that we've asked to be everyday players can actually be everyday players.
Last thing here, and then I want to get there's a clip from Francona that we want to touch on shortly, but I want to bring up, to me, another player that I think is very vital is going to come from the rotation this time. Look, we now know you get with Hunter Green. He's a Cy Young caliber pitcher, no doubt about it. But I think this one of the top most important players on this roster has to be Nick Lodolo. I think that Nick Lodolo, is the difference between a team that's going to be fighting for a wild card and a team that can win the division. Because I think if Hunter Green continues pitching the way we saw him, we saw him kind of break out last year. We've seen glimpses of it, but last year was that breakout year for Hunter Green. If Lodolo stays healthy and has that break, look, Lodolo in the early goings of the last 2 years has just looked phenomenal. It's just been the durability factor and his ability to stay healthy that's been a question mark. But if Lodolo complements Hunter Green and the Reds have a dominant 1-2 punch at the top of that rotation, that's how you're going to win a lot of series throughout this season. When you have Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo in back-to-back outings, and then, of course, the complementary pieces in that rotation of obviously Andrew Abbott, you get Brady Singer in the offseason, whether it's Nick Martinez or Rhett Lauder or whoever. I think for the Reds to just be a team that's, kind of screwing around and competing for one of the final wild card spots, being that team or actually going to be a true contender to win this division, I think it all comes down to Nick Lodolo in that rotation, because you know what you get every 5 days with Hunter Green. But if you can have a Hunter Green / Nick Lodolo back-to-back outings every series, That's how you're going to win a lot of series. That's how you're going to win a lot of games, and that's how you're going to compete to win this division. We talked about Candelario, but I think the second most important player, maybe the most important player in my eyes, has to be Nick Lodolo in that regards. For this team to be a true division contender, I think you need a strong 1-2 punch. It can't be Hunter Green and then complementary pitching throughout the rest of the rotation. I think to be a legitimate team to win this division, it has to be a dominant 1-2 punch. Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo. Nick Lodolo, I think, is the key to the success as well for the Reds this season.
I think it's everyone but Hunter Green. I mean, I think you could easily say Andrew Abbott as well. He's been great to start years and has fallen off towards the end. Brett Lauder, if he can be what he was for the last however many starts last year, it's great. It's the same reason I don't put Elliott as the number one thing in the Reds' offense on the offensive side of the ball or defensive side of the ball, that to be the most important player, because I like to think I know what I'm getting out of him. Yeah. So it's everyone else that has to pull their weight for this team to exceed expectations. And now I think it's the same with the pitching staff. I'm uber confident in Hunter Green being a Cy Young candidate and an ace from start to finish this year. Now, obviously, injuries could come into play, and that would be a nightmare, but I'm so confident in what Hunter Green's going to be able to do on the mound that he's so far back in my mind in terms of things to worry about that, yeah, I'm 100% focused on what Nick Lodolo can do consistently. Is Brady Singer going to be the step up that we want him to be? Can Graham Ashcraft be a better reliever than he was starter? I think there's a ton of questions on the pitching staff that could really jolt this team forward, and I just think the confidence in what Hunter Green's able to do just moves him down the list and therefore bumps everyone else up.
Yeah, Nick Lodolo is a guy that I've had serious doubts about, so I'm not going to sit here and say too much about him. All I'll say is when he's on, he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. His stuff's absurd. He just has to be healthy. And we're at a point now where if he does get hurt this year for a significant amount of time, that's a guy you just can't trust. At some point, Nick Senzel is a guy you can't trust. He's just not that good. So I'm going to hope that Nick Lodolo is going to be healthy, he's going to be available, and he's going to fight through it this year, and he's going to be that bona fide ace that we thought he could be. I don't know if he will be, and I think Rhett Lauder is a bigger X factor right now than Nick Lodolo, at least in my mind. And not that I'm ruling Nick Lodolo out. I'm not saying that. I trust Rhett Lauder up until this point more than I trust Nick Lodolo.
Oh, and that's fair. It's from a trust standpoint, and that's funny too because we've seen 1 month of Rhett Lauder, and I agree with you. Like I feel pretty good. I put it this way: if Rhett Lauder, and assuming that again he gets back on that regular throwing program and there's no restrictions and that elbow was just a slight, just a little, tightness, and he's fine the rest of the way. If Rhett Lauder is not in the rotation on opening day, I view that as a good thing. And what I mean by that is assuming if he's not in the rotation on opening day, not due to injury, I find that to be a good thing because if he's injured and out, that's a problem. But if he's not in the rotation on opening day, that means that everyone else has showed out throughout spring training and that there's just not enough room for him. And that's a good problem to have. Depth is a good problem to have if that's the case. And that's how I view that. But Elliott, yeah, I agree. I just didn't move him up the list that high just because we've only seen 1 month. But, man, if he is that guy, then to be fair, you have Hunter Green. Whoever the second punch is, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's obviously Andrew Abbott that steps up and he's that dominant second punch in the rotation. But for the Reds to be a true contender, I think they need a second pitcher in that rotation that is going to be as dominant as Hunter Green to provide them that dominant 1-2 punch. But let's continue talking Reds. Another clip that we're going to get to, this from Terry Francona from spring training. The Reds obviously led Major League Baseball, in steals last season. And Terry Francona has been asked a lot about that. But it's not the steals that he has a problem with. It's about what comes with those steals. And he does not want to lead the league in this particular category. And he made that clear earlier this week. We'll talk about that when we come back. We're off the bench when we return. We highlighted the coverage of Charlie Goldsmith earlier. We appreciate him and the work he's doing over at spring training. There's a lot of media personnel, obviously, there covering the Reds, and all of them do really good work. Obviously, Charlie, we're biased because he gives us a lot of time on the show. We love his work, of course, but we appreciate all those who are in Cincinnati, I should say, Goodyear right now, bringing you Cincinnati Reds coverage of spring training and the early going. A lot of buzz and optimism about this team, although some question marks. There's a lot of buzz and optimism, mainly because of the biggest thing that the biggest move that they made in the offseason, which was going to get the best manager available in Terry Francona. Well, earlier today, Charlie Clifford with WLWT had a chance to catch up with Terry Francona. And look, earlier we talked about, the significance of Matt McClain and obviously, with some of the pieces that they've made in the offseason. But looking back at last year, the Reds led the league in stolen bases. And with that came a lot of, base running errors. How could you be the best base running team and the worst base running team at the same time? That was one of the biggest issues for the Cincinnati Reds a year ago, and an issue that Terry Francona wants to make sure that they address this upcoming season. Here's Terry Francona commenting on that with, of course, Charlie Clifford with WLWTV. Take a look.
They're eager, which I love, but it's important to set the tone of what we want to be as a ball club. That's the gist of it.
How much patience will you have? Mental errors on the bases, mental errors in the field. How do you approach that in spring?
There's a little bit of a fine line. One, in spring training, you want guys to be very aggressive because you want them to find out, like going first to third, what's too much. Okay, I can't do that. I want them to find out now, not in June. I also don't want them looking over their shoulder, afraid to make a mistake. When you play the game ultra aggressively, as we will, you're going to make some mistakes. Now, saying that, I don't want us to lead the league in making outs on the bases. I think fans sometimes want to see you be very vocal and call guys out. I'm not sure that's holding guys accountable. That's embarrassing players. Never want to do that.
God, he's good.
He's good.
He's good. Yeah, I love him. But your guys' thoughts on that, because that was a problem last year. It was fun watching them be aggressive on the base paths, but it got to a point where it was no longer fun. It was almost reckless at times. I mean, we weren't even when they would get a steal, I felt like Reds fans were still mad because it's like, why would they send them there? It became to the point where it was almost borderline reckless at times, and the team that didn't have the margin for error was so thin. I understood being aggressive because they lacked, they weren't confident that they could, bring runs in a lot of times. And if you get runners on base, that's your best chance of bringing runs in is by being extra aggressive. There's a point of being extra aggressive and to a point to where it became reckless. And I think that's the biggest problem they had last year, and something that you guys just heard. Francona, finding that balance is going to be key of how they take advantage of their ability on the base paths, but also limiting the mistakes that they make. And that's what Francona is coming in to help minimize those mistakes.
They did lead the league last year in outs on base. So how that works is they had 66. The next closest team was the Cubs with 59. That does not include pickoffs, caught stealing, or force plays. Outs on base is just like a runner is out making a base runner play. He's stretching a double into a triple, a single into a double, stuff like that. That's what outs on base is. They led the league in that. So they were the worst team in outs on base last year. Pickoffs. So this is exactly what pickoffs are. They were second worst in that. The Nationals were picked off 29 times. The Reds 23rd times. Pickoffs while trying to steal. It's a different thing. Reds again second worst, only behind the Nationals. The Nationals, by the way, were the worst base running team maybe in the history of the sport. They were caught stealing last year, and I can't believe this is true. 73 times. They were caught stealing 73 times. The Reds, for reference, were caught stealing 45 times, and that's being as aggressive as you humanly can. The Nationals were caught stealing 73 times. The Reds weren't good. I mean, you look at every metric, stolen base percentage, the Reds were good based on the amount of steals they had. They're a top 7 base running team in terms of stolen base percentage. But outside of that, that's what they do. They're aggressive, and it makes the Reds who they are. There has to be a way to control that a little bit, and that's what Terry's talking about there. It's been one of the bigger focal points, I would say, since the end of last year. Once you fire David Bell, we need to clean up the simple mistakes. We need to fix this because guys need to know when a double's a double and when a triple's a triple. Like you have to know these things. right? You can't go stretching out from home if J.R. House is waving you on, and maybe that's a little bit on J.R. House too. But you got to know when to go home. You got to know all the basics of base running. And I think Terry Francona is going to instill a staff that teaches that, and I think the Reds are going to improve. They were bad on the base path. Every metric shows that. This is why you go out and you hire Terry Francona, a guy who's had success coaching up young guys, a guy that's going to have control of the clubhouse fully. There's no this David Bell. He's young guys taking advantage. That's not how this works this year. You're going to see a completely different Reds team, and I'm going to say you see it pretty much right from the jump.
I just hope this doesn't mean no running. I hope they do stay aggressive because I think that's a lot of the benefit that we have, not only just in the new rules, but with the roster we have as well. I think we saw last year that though they did get out a lot and they had a lot of mistakes, I think a lot of that just comes with the age and the youth of the team. I think these guys we're a unique roster in the skill we have on the base path in terms of speed and athleticism, really up and down the roster with the exception of a few guys. And I think dialing that back beyond just being more careful would be a mistake for this team. I think it's such an added benefit, especially with guys like Elliott de la Cruz on the base path, that you have to let them be risky. Stuff that other players wouldn't necessarily do, we can, at least in some situations. And I think that's important to recognize. And I'm not saying Tito won't. He's one of the best managers of all time. He's a Hall of Famer. I'm sure he'll recognize that. I think what he's saying here is we're going to be more cautious and we're going to learn about base running before we just run. And I think that's the biggest thing and what he's going to bring to the table. But they're not going to stop running. I certainly hope they don't stop running. I think that's such a benefit that we have with the new rules and the roster we've built so far.
And to be fair, he did say in that clip that they were still going to be aggressive.
Right.
So, they're going to still – I just think they're going to be better.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to change anything. I think they're just going to be better. You got to know these things when you're playing this sport. You have to know how to run the base path, and I think Terry Francona is going to teach that this season. I think you're going to see a difference.
Was it Bubba Thompson? Who was it that they added at the tail end of it was right before camp ended, and they added him just mainly because of his speed. And that was kind of
Bubba.
That's what I thought. That's really the main thing he brought to the table was that, and that was kind of the sign right there that they were truly going to lean into that. This was obviously with David Bell, of course, but that when with the Bubba move, that to me that signified that okay, they were telling you right off the bat, we're going to just take our athletes, we're going to take our fastest runners, and we are just going to lean into that. And they did, and it paid off, and it also worked against them at the same time. And to sum up everything we've said, it's basically just trying to find that middle ground as far as that goes. Now, you could also argue, because they attempt more stolen bases than anybody else, of course, there's a chance that there's more of an opportunity to throw them out more than anybody else. But what was that number? You said the Cubs had the second most throwouts. Was it?
So outs on base is
outs on base.
This is not stolen base. The outs on base is just double and the triple, tagging up. It's any base running play. Okay. The Reds led Major League Baseball in that, which means they were the worst team. They had 66 of those. Cubs in second with 59, second worst at 59. But in terms of the pickoffs and the pickoff while caught stealing, the Reds were still second worst. They had 23 pickoffs last year, and they had 9 pickoffs while caught stealing, which again is second worst only to the Washington Nationals.
Interesting enough. All right. No. So and again, I don't even know how much of that. And by the way, how many of those mistakes too? And again, it just depends on how much of a green light. How many of these players have the green light? Are these, how many of these players are making decisions on their own of when to round and when to take third? And how much of this does just come down to simple, the third base coach or whatever, making decisions on when to send guys? That has a lot to do with it as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's the part of it too, where Jonathan India said what he said, and whether or not you want to believe him, that's fine. Guys taking advantage of David Bell last year, I'm sure was a story, especially on the base path.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if we all wanted to agree with it last year. I didn't. I was a David Bell guy, so I didn't want to agree with it. But based on what I've heard from players this offseason after he got fired, that appears to be what the case was. Guys were running. They all had green lights. Just go. If you're feeling it, you just go. You just run. And I think that was the problem. And I think you're going to see this year there's going to be a better system. You're going to see Terry take a little bit more control. It doesn't mean he's stopping all this, and that's a fair fear by Jacob and probably a decent amount of Reds fans that we're just going to stop stealing bases. That's not going to be the case. You're still going to steal. They're just going to be a little bit more aware of what can happen if you mess this up. I don't think last year they were aware of what happened. There were so many simple mistakes. Yeah. So many simple mistakes. And that includes not even just base running, that's defense as well. We had Stuart Fairchild multiple times last year catching a routine fly ball while a base runner's on third with less than 2 outs, not throwing home. That's the kind of stuff that can't happen anymore. And not to be mean to Stuart Fairchild, but that's why a guy like Stuart Fairchild shouldn't be out there. And there has to be a point where Terry Francona comes in and he fixes this roster from top to bottom. You're still going to get who they are. We're not changing how the Reds look next year. They're still the Cincinnati Reds that you've come to know the past several years now. They're just going to be a little bit more refined.
I think where my concern comes into play isn't necessarily that Tito's going to be like, we're not running anymore. Like, he would never say that.
Yeah.
It's what happened last year. It's the exact opposite of it. If David Bell went into the locker room and said, we're going to be aggressive, we're going to run, and the players take that a step too far, and that leads to a lot of outs, I think the same thing could happen with a bunch of young players if Terry Francona comes in there before opening day and says, we're going to be more careful, be more measured with how we handle our running on the base paths, and then they dial it way back and are way too conservative because they're just young players trying to listen to their coach.
Sure.
So that's kind of where my concern comes in. I think they'll find their level at some point during the season, and it's going to end up for the long term being a huge benefit to the Reds to probably dial it back to start the year. But it's just going to be a little bit of getting used to when it comes to watching the team play. And I think it's going to come in a lot of different ways than just the base path. I think this team under Terry Francona is going to look a lot different when it comes to how they play baseball than they did under David Bell.
Let me ask you this. The Reds ranked third last season in stolen bases. They had a 207. The Nationals led the league with 223. The Reds ranked third in stolen bases last year. Do you think they finish, if you were a betting man, which I know you are, and I guess you both are, if you were to bet on the Reds finishing top 10, let's say top 5 actually, top 5 in stolen bases, would you take that bet this year?
I would.
I think I would as well. I still think they're going to be that team. I don't think anything's changing that much.
In my bet on that, I thought they led. Yeah. I thought they led the league in stolen bases. That's on me. My bad. But either way, yeah, I think they're still going to be top 5. But I think you're going to see less stolen bases than a year ago. But I think that's going to come with less attempts. I think that just limiting those and just taking higher percentage opportunities versus just forcing something is going to be key as well.
There's not enough power on this lineup to win enough games to be in the playoff on if you're not running.
Yeah.
They're going to have to take advantage of the base paths and squeeze some runs out of plays where other teams wouldn't and things along those lines. That's how they win games. I don't think that's going to change just because, Terry Francona's the manager. I think they're going to be better at it. Probably less overall attempts, hopefully the same amount of steals. It'd be a hell of a place to live.
Do you want to hear something interesting I just saw? So stolen base opportunities is a metric. Baseball has a metric for every single thing in the world. Stolen base opportunities is a metric. It's plate appearances through which a runner was on first or second with the next base open.
Okay.
Stolen base opportunities. The Arizona Diamondbacks led last year in stolen base opportunities with 2,367. The Reds ranked dead last in stolen base opportunities last year with was at 1,994. Not even remotely close to the Arizona Diamondbacks. So that stuff, like, I think you're going to see more of approach. That's batting approach as well. When you're on base approach, defensively approach. I think you're going to see a change in a little bit of the way that these guys have been operating. Again, not changing who they are, but you're refining it.
All right, Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. One more baseball tidbit here, not really Reds related, but Mike Trout just made it be known about an hour ago. Mike Trout announces that he will be a full-time right fielder moving forward. And that got a lot of play on social media already here in just the last hour that it's been up. But we haven't done news or not news in a while, but news or not news, Mike Trout moving to be a full-time right fielder. News or not news?
Yeah, we were talking about it in the chat. Maybe playing outfield is an injury risk, so you move your best players off that spot in center field, so they don't get hurt and miss a lot of time.
I don't get how people don't understand it. It's like you have so many more unknown quantities once you start running out in the outfield.
Right.
Like, those are where the injuries happen, and I don't want my guys getting injured out there. Mike Trout has not been a healthy player in I don't know how many years, 5 years, 4 years. I don't know how long it's been. He hasn't been a healthy player. If I were them, I would have just DH'd him at this point.
He's said he's going to be DHing a lot.
Okay, I was going to say, there's no reason for that guy to ever see the field at this point in his career. He's a Hall of Famer already, first ballot. Let the man hit, and that's all he has to do. Is it news? I wouldn't say so. I would say it's not news, but it is something to be aware of as you see like premier superstars in the outfield. Like I bet Juan Soto very soon in his career becomes full-time DH.
Under 5 years, under 3 years.
Yeah, like you're going to start seeing this more and more in this sport where if you're a premier guy, if you're getting paid top dollar in the outfield and you still are bringing, and the reason they're paying you is because you're phenomenal at the plate,
right.
You're just not going to be in the outfield anymore because there's no reason. Like Luis Robert, there's no reason for that guy to ever see the outfield. He's a great defender. He's phenomenal. He's the league's maybe the best defensive center fielder. But if I know I'm not getting games out of him, and I know I'm going to get 35, 40 home runs out of him at the plate, why would I risk that? That doesn't make any sense to me personally. I think the more and more that you see this sport go, and you're starting to see it with pitchers aren't going to go 6 innings anymore. Right. They're going to stop. They're going to start going 5 innings, and that's going to be it, just for health. Everything's about health in baseball. So in my opinion, is that news? Mike Trout? No, but in the large scheme of things, I think there will be a change in baseball where you're not going to see outfielders out there, premier outfielders playing defense.
Yeah, great point by Jim Morrison in our chat. I assume not the real Jim Morrison.
I would assume not.
But he said it already happened with Giancarlo Stanton a long time ago. And obviously that does kind of get glossed over because of the injuries and how sustainable he's been a DH since. But, yeah, that's a star player in the outfield that had injuries rack up, and then he had to switch to DH in the prime of his career. So, yeah, we've seen it happen before. I would assume Aaron Judge is in that same boat coming up with how great he is in center field. And we know what, keeps the checks coming for him is the home runs. So he's not going to risk the injuries, which we've already seen him have in center field for the Yankees. This is something that's going to ripple throughout the sport, I think. And we're going to see people be more concerned about their stars' health, and playing them in the outfield might not be the best use of your time if it's risking those players.
Yeah, I would have said, like on the news, not news portion of this, I would have said, I'm going to say it's not news just because, you're still an outfielder and there's still going to be the question marks of your durability and your ability to stay healthy, right? But if he was coming out saying, hey, moving forward, he's no longer going to be out in the field at all, he's just going to be primarily a DH moving forward, I would have found that to be big news. And I'm just more surprised that more teams don't operate that way. You brought up a good point with Stanton. I remember the whole reason that everyone kept arguing that, hey, the DH, it would be so great when it comes to the National League is because it can help prolong the careers of a lot of either older veteran players or guys who, of course, are banged up a lot. It was the Big Papi approach, of course, that the Red Sox used. They were able to expand the career and extend the career of obviously David Ortiz because of that. And we thought we'd see more of that. But again, it's rare to have a full-time DH. As far as an individual, or at least a combination of 1 to 2 players doing that. Obviously, the Reds kind of move theirs around a lot. I don't know if I like that or not. I would like to have a guy you can count on consistently in that. I thought Joey Votto's career would have been extended because of the DH, but obviously Joey Votto's kind of decline didn't put him in position to be able to take advantage of that either. But I did. When the National League got the DH, I thought, oh, man, this is going to be cool. This is how the Reds are going to be able to extend the career of Joey Votto. That obviously ended up not being the case. I don't think the Reds will ever have a primary DH, though, mainly because of the fact that I don't think they're ever going to have that dominant of a hitter to consistently rely on to keep him out of the field, anyways. So that's
they might have a bad enough hitter or a bad enough fielder that's a fine enough bat that they have to get him out of the field. I think that's something we could end up seeing this year. It's almost what we saw last year when Jamer got so hurt that he couldn't play defense. And you're like, well, he's not a good enough hitter to play DH, but there's nowhere else you can put him. I think that's where the Reds get stuck maybe at some point down the line.
Let's go steer.
Yeah.
All right. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing Game in Dayton. Let's close out the radio portion of the show talking a little Cincinnati Bengals football. Last year we came into the NFL season putting the Cincinnati Bengals in that Super Bowl contender category. Obviously, with a lot of question marks that still need to be answered this offseason, it might be an incomplete grade on this Bengals team at the moment, but the perception of the Bengals right now is what? Is this still a Super Bowl contending team? We'll discuss that when we come back. More Off the Bench next. Justin Kenner, Casey McAllister, Elliott Rearing, and Jacob Tissett with you here, off and rolling here on a Monday. The bench here today. Okay, the Cincinnati Bengals. So I saw that James Rapine had put this out a little bit ago. It kind of caught my attention, and it was like, man, I remember heading into last season, I think all the perception about the Cincinnati Bengals, I would have, a year ago, if you would have asked me at this time, are the Bengals in that Super Bowl conference, even coming off of the missing the playoffs that first of the 2 straight years, I chalked it up to a 9-win team. It still finished with above 500, even without Joe Burrow playing the back half of the season. I chalked up them missing the playoffs specifically to obviously being without Joe Burrow. You end up having Joe Burrow for the length of this past season. For the first time, he played every single game. That was a huge win in itself. Obviously, they missed the playoffs. A Super Bowl contender a year ago at this time, but as we sit here ahead of the offseason about to begin, free agency and the draft and everything else, a lot of talk about whether or not this is still a Super Bowl contending team. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler was asked about this, and obviously the recent report on this. Jeremy Fowler asked about the Cincinnati Bengals as he starts positioning teams into tiers heading into this upcoming offseason. He won't say that the Cincinnati Bengals, that they're not a Super Bowl contending team, but he says that they are a teetering Super Bowl contending team. Do you agree? The perception of the Bengals is what? Is this a Super Bowl contending team even before we head into free agency and the draft, or is this team still far from that?
I think that's pretty head on. Teetering Super Bowl contender is a pretty great way to describe the Bengals before we get into free agency. Now I think there's 0 additions required for them to move into a locked-in Super Bowl contender. If they ran into next year with the same roster as last year, they're a Super Bowl contender. They're not. I mean, it's not ideal. That's certainly not what we want here. But they were 1 game away from missing the playoffs, and I think anyone in this city believes that they could have, hypothetically, went on a run. They went, 9-8, and 7 of those 8 losses were 1-score games to playoff teams. So I'm not exactly, ruling them out if they're able to sneak in with the same roster as last year, and it was close enough that I think it's possible. So if they're able to make any additions and then keep, that core that we talk about ad nauseum on this show around, then certainly they're contenders. I think teetering on the brink of being an official contender is certainly where I'd have them right now.
My thing is, and this is all based on the fact that I'm assuming Trey and T will be back. If they are back, and like Jacob says, all we do, we don't go out and get anybody. And obviously, you'll get someone. You'll get a couple probably minor free agent deals done for the defense. You're going to draft well. I'm going to assume the Bengals are going to draft well. And then from that, I think that they're absolutely a playoff team. There was one fluke loss to the Patriots last year that kept them out. Could they be better? 100% they could be better. But as of right now, no team in the NFL, and I'll still stand by it, wants to play Joe Burrow. Nobody. Especially, after last year. Like, the Bengals were the hottest team, arguably, in the NFL heading into the playoffs. It just comes down to the Patriots game. It's going to piss me off forever. But if they were able to win that game, I don't think the Bengals were one and done in the playoffs this year. I really don't. I think that's a team that maybe fights for an AFC championship. And that's based on the fact is how bad it went last year. They were still that good. They were still good enough, at least in my eyes. So as of right now, I think they're on the brink. If you lose T. Higgins, if you lose Trey, we're going to talk about a different story. I think it becomes a little bit different. And that's where I'm a little bit scared because – and this is why I don't understand the argument to not bring either of them back. I think you should bring both back because you're taking away from something that already wasn't, perfect would be a word I guess I would choose to use, wasn't good enough last year. You're taking away from that instead of adding on. I would keep them, add on to it. I would not take them away and then replace them, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't want to sit in the next year hoping that we replace T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson well enough because then they are not a Super Bowl contender.
Jesus, you two are the 2 biggest homers in the world. I could not agree with you more. I agree with everything you guys are saying, actually. No,
there we go.
At the end of the day, I watched the Chargers, who I tried to I was gonna. I might need that back. Don't be throwing that. Look, the bottom line is I watched the Chargers, who I tried to lean into and say, oh, that's a sleeper team heading into the playoffs, and I wanted to believe it. I'm still a Justin Herbert believer, and I like that defense, but my goodness. The Bengals, I still think, even though they missed the playoffs, I'll take the Bengals over the Chargers right now, even before any changes are made this upcoming offseason. You look at the Steelers, and obviously the Bengals split with the Steelers this season. You look how bad Pittsburgh looked in the playoffs. I would take the Bengals over them. The bottom line is if the Bengals would have won, obviously in week 1, we've talked about that Patriots loss. They get into the playoffs. They're winning a playoff game. and then it's a coin flip. It would have been a close one with the Buffalo Bills. It would have been you know what I mean? Like it would have been anyone's ball game at that point. They definitely, I do think the Bengals would have beat the Texans. If the Bengals would have faced the Texans in the postseason this year, I'm taking the Bengals over the Texans. I'm taking the Bengals over the Steelers or Chargers. And obviously with Baltimore, yes, Baltimore beat them twice, but look, it was one possession both times. It could have gone literally either way, and it went in way of the Ravens twice. But I would have probably said, you know what, I'm going to take the Bengals for the third, in the third matchup. I would take them then. Even with all their deficiencies, even with all of their issues, the reason Joe Burrow is fighting so hard to keep the offense intact is because that offense, as bad as the defense was and as bad as the deficiencies were, they still had a chance to win even with all those deficiencies because of how explosive that offense is. They make one tweak defensively, one tiny fix defensively, not even to be elite. As you guys have said, this team's a Super Bowl contender. So, yes, I'm still buying that this is a Super Bowl contending team, and I don't like your team, so that's wild for me to say that. But the reality is there are teams that made the playoffs last year that aren't even close to being a Super Bowl contending team. The Bengals missed it, and I think they're closer than some of the teams that made it last year. So, yes, I absolutely think they're still a Super Bowl contending team with some moves to make, of course, but I still feel pretty confident about them heading into next season.
If you're a gambler, I think the Super Bowl odds, like teams 1 through 13, the Bengals are the only team in that mix that didn't make the playoffs last year, and they're in the hunt to be one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl. So it would be silly to not say that they're a Super Bowl contender. It would be ludicrous.
Luda. All right, that is United Dairy Farmers. That was luckily,
that was great, Kenner.
It was something, nonetheless. All right, off the bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Aaron Rodgers is being right now. Vegas has the Steelers as the favorite landing spot for him. How are we feeling about the possibility of Aaron Rodgers going to Pittsburgh? We were going to do a buy or sell, but I'll throw this one at you now. If Aaron Rodgers goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, are they a legit Super Bowl contender? Buy or sell?
No.
Yeah, I'm going to buy wherever Rodgers goes next. I think this is a Favre thing where he sucks in New York
and then he's good somewhere
else.
Don't do that.
Yeah, I think Rodgers has at least one more year in him that he's going to be all right. So I'll buy it. That's my nightmare. Rodgers to Pittsburgh is my nightmare.
No, I'm all good. I think, will he be better than he was in New York? Yeah, because it's literally impossible to be any worse.
I think he's got one more in him.
I think he's got my issue is I don't know how him and Tomlin will gel. Like I don't.
No, they wouldn't.
Like that's what I'm saying. Like I think Tomlin would kick him out. So I'm going to say that if he goes there, fine. You can be in the long list of quarterbacks since Big Ben retired that failed as a Pittsburgh Steelers starting quarterback. I'm not intrigued by it at all.
I think it could work. It could work.
No.
Plus, Mike Tomlin, he loves bad personalities. They try to act like they have just stand-up people over there, but, he loves bad personalities. He milks them for a little bit, gets what he can out of them, and then he kicks them to the curb. But, it's still a breeding ground for bad personalities and attitudes over there. Look, Aaron Rodgers is a complicated personality, no doubt about it. But I do think that I think the reason it would work, I think Aaron Rodgers didn't work for the Packers towards the end because I don't think he respected Matt LaFleur. He clearly didn't respect what was going on with the Jets. I think there would be a respectability factor if he stepped foot into the Steelers locker room. I'm not saying that all of Aaron Rodgers' antics would just go out the window, but I think they would be more in check a little bit. I think he wouldn't feel like he has to push his weight around as much in Pittsburgh because I think he respects that franchise and respects what's around him. I think when he went to the Jets, he felt like he owned the Jets. When he was with the Packers, he knew that he was the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, the Packers have been good since he's left, but he still seemed bigger than the Packers. He seemed bigger than the Jets. I think it's safe to say Aaron Rodgers will not be bigger than the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, so I think there would be a little bit of a balance there. I actually think it could work. Super Bowl contender, though, I wouldn't say they're Super Bowl favorites, but I would say they're closer to a Super Bowl contending team than they would be with any other quarterback option, including Justin Fields. So I think Pittsburgh, you have to be aggressive and go after Aaron Rodgers if there's an opportunity to make it happen. I think, Aaron, let me ask you, are the Steelers better? Elliott, the Steelers, Justin Fields the quarterback or Aaron Rodgers their quarterback? Who makes them better?
I think Aaron Rodgers is the better quarterback, but I think Justin Fields, if you have any semblance of believing in the future of your franchise, you start Justin Fields. Justin Fields was good last year. And not to mention, like, Aaron Rodgers, I'm sure temporarily he'd be fine. But the Steelers have to think about, like, what their team's going to look like in 10 years. Why are you not drafting quarterbacks? Draft a quarterback. It didn't work with Kenny. Fine, go out and get a different one.
Yeah, trade Jackson Dart.
Trade up. Make a move. Do something because the longer you wait and the longer you kick that tire, it's just going to be a disaster for the Steelers. Eventually, by the time you figure out who your quarterback is, your defense is going to be terrible. You're going to prolong this, and so the defense carries you for year and year and year and year and year out, in and out. And then by the time you draft a quarterback, you're not going to have a defense. Yeah. So I'm fine with it. You want to get Aaron Rodgers? Fine. Next year, bring back Russell Wilson. I don't care what you do. Tom Brady, will bring him out of retirement. He'll own the Steelers, he'll own the Raiders, and he'll start for quarterback for the Steelers too. I don't care. Do it for as long as you possibly can, because you are wasting your defense. Wasting it. Throwing it away.
The Steelers quarterback next year will not be one of the two on their roster. Won't be Russ, won't be Fields. They're going to go somewhere else. They're going to try to figure something else out, and they're going to fail if it's Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers or any of the names that have been thrown out there, because they have to tank and they have to figure out how to get a viable quarterback in there, or they have to use big money when a quarterback somehow hits free agency, which doesn't happen anymore in the sport. So, I don't know what the Steelers' route out of this is if it's not having a 7-10 season or worse than that. And I just don't think Tomlin's ever going to get to that level, which is why I think they have to fire Tomlin to get out of this thing. And that's tough to do when you have a coach that doesn't do anything but win. So, it's a flat circle for the Steelers, and I think they're going to be stuck here until they lose, which is tough.
Yeah, I saw a rumor last week, and I don't know if it was when Justin was here or not. I saw the rumor that they were interested in trading for Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
If that happens, then I'm concerned. Then I'm not a Trevor Lawrence believer, but I think Trevor Lawrence with a good system works. So maybe if they make a trade, a blockbuster trade, bring in a perennial starting quarterback, if they do that, then we're talking. If we're just going out and signing 40-year-old quarterbacks who used to be real good, you have no chance to win a Super Bowl ever. So do I buy or sell that Aaron Rodgers makes them a Super Bowl contender? I don't even think it's remotely close. They make the playoffs, sure. They have a 0.0% chance to win a Super Bowl.
The reason why the Trevor Lawrence trade talk makes me nervous is there's a 0% chance the Jaguars trade Trevor Lawrence.
Correct.
It's $110 million against the cap. It would put him in absolute hell for about 5 years. There's no way they trade him. But this leads me to believe that the Steelers are becoming self-aware.
Yeah.
The Steelers know, hey, Russ and Fields and 40-year-old Big Ben and Kenny Pickett, that's not going to work.
Probably
and we
not.
have a window here where we could maybe be competitive with some of these players we have, and we're going to go try to get someone that could get us there. And I don't like them being aware. I like them going out to get, $2 million Russ to be their quarterback. I'd like them going out to get Rodgers. But the fact that they're picking up the phone, calling young stars or some people consider stars, to try to come be their quarterback, that does worry me with how they go.
What if Sam Darnold goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers? Like, again, because we're going to think about who Sam Darnold was for the Vikings through the regular season, but then we'll constantly remember who he was in the two biggest games of the season, which was that Lions game and, of course, the playoff game. The Sam Darnold from last year's regular season with this Steelers team does what for you?
Nothing. I mean, Sam Darnold's nothing. No disrespect. I think he had a miraculous year. He's going to earn some money this season. Good for him. He proved that he wasn't worthless. But I'm all good.
So if you're Sam Darnold this offseason and you have the franchise tag and hypothetically you get offered something in free agency and the Vikings allow you to choose, are you taking the 1 year at $40-something million, or would you take a 3-year deal with less money to have the long-term security? Because I would venture to say that this is the last time Sam Darnold will be an interesting name on the free agency market.
Yeah, I mean, I assume they love him there, and I think the Vikings have a good thing going on.
They've said they're trying to bring him back.
So, like, if I were Sam, I'd want to go back. But if someone's offering me $40 million, you play 1 year and you're set, man. You're set for life. Your NFL career was worth it at that point. Like, that's, like, selfishly, I would leave. Whether or not Sam Darnold would, that's up to him. I just don't think Sam Darnold is going to be a good quarterback moving forward. I think he had one magical run on a team that wasn't supposed to be good. Yeah. And I think he got – I don't want to say lucky because he obviously proved that it was more than luck. But I'm all good on Sam Darnold. If I was a team, I wouldn't want to touch Sam Darnold for $40 million.
I read something over the weekend that said it would be, when they do that thing on social media or say, hey, the Vikings have a chance to do something really funny. Yeah. The Vikings have a chance to do something really funny here. I think that if they rolled with J.J. McCarthy as their starting quarterback next year, having a quarterback on a rookie deal, you have currently the most expensive wide receiver on the market, obviously, in Justin Jefferson. The Vikings could be a potential, even with Addison there, the Vikings could be a potential landing spot for a T. Higgins if he ends up making his way outside of Cincinnati. because they would have enough money to, afford to be able to pay him. And then they would have that three-headed monster over there with Addison, T. Higgins, and Justin Jefferson. So that puts a lot of pressure on J.J. McCarthy, because if you can't win with that, J.J., you'll never win at anything in life after that. So
yeah, I think if I'm the Vikings and I have J.J. starting next year, I would start by getting the best rushing attack and the best defense in the history of the sport, because that's really the only chance you have of winning, and maybe get the other team's plays too.
I mean,
he started that, and he knew where he was going to finish it, and I like it. I don't know when he thought of that. Like, it must have been a spur of the moment thing, but I liked where he ended up.
But all right, good stuff. We're out of time. We're going to be, following Charlie Goldsmith's coverage of the Reds. We're going to be having him on the show from Goodyear coming up later on in the week. Sam LaCure going to join us tomorrow. Of course, it was announced last week that the broadcasting teams for the Reds have officially been announced. We've been wanting Sam on for a while, but we were all kind of waiting to make sure he was a part of the broadcast team moving forward. Obviously, we're happy that he's back, and we're happy to have him back on the show tomorrow. That has been confirmed, but if he's not on the show tomorrow, it's not my fault.
It is your fault.
Well, no, see, that's where your disconnect is there, because it would be your fault.
So, like, from now on, I just we promote guests. It'll just be not even at the start of the show. It's just going to be Casey. When he's on, tell me, and then out of nowhere, hey, guess what? Sam LaCure joins us next.
That's going to be how you start doing it. I think so.
And then, we're going to have Doug Gottlieb on the show later this week. Him and I are texting buddies now, so I can't wait.
Are you texting buddies, or are you just texting?
We are actually, Twitter DM type hate going on.
I was gonna say, it's probably hate driven. I don't know about buddies.
I can tell we're about to exchange numbers here pretty soon.
You're finding a middle ground.
Yeah. He said my guy earlier, so we're buds. Who knows? All right, guys, that wraps it up for us here today, and we'll do it again tomorrow. Until tomorrow, this has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. All right, we got a couple more minutes. What's that?
There's a big argument in the chat right now, and the argument is between Mr. Mo and I think the rest of us. So I'm trying to get where he's coming from. He's saying the Bengals weren't Super Bowl contenders this year, and here's my argument. Do you think that the Bengals would have been blown out? Because I think we're all on the same page that the Bengals beat the Chargers and the Texans. I have no reason to believe otherwise. Those two teams played terribly. If the Bengals played or the Steelers stink. If the Bengals played the Ravens the way that we were playing, the Ravens, the Bills, or the Chiefs, do the Bengals get blown out in the playoffs by any of those three teams? I think
there's blowout potential in Buffalo.
That's my only one. I would say there might be the Bengals never get blown out by the Chiefs. They're not going to get blown out by the Ravens. I think those are all competitive games, and by definition, if they're competitive games, you'd be fighting for the AFC Championship game, which makes them the contender.
I think it is a definitions argument as well. I think some people determine Super Bowl contender is playing in the Super Bowl, and some people have the goalposts moved a little bit. I think if you're in the conference championship, you are a Super Bowl contender. I think if you're one game away from the Super Bowl, you are a Super Bowl contender. So if I can see the Bengals getting to the conference championship, in my world, I deem them a Super Bowl contender. Do I think the Bengals could have beaten all three of those teams? Probably not, because it would have just required the defense to play at a level that they certainly would have had to play at. We hadn't seen so far. But with the way the defense was playing down the stretch, could I have seen the Bengals beating two of those three teams and playing in a conference championship game? Absolutely, if they snuck in. So, yeah.
Real quick, because I'm not saying I disagree with you, but the Ravens are an interesting talking point here because I viewed them as a Super Bowl contender a year ago at this time before they got Derrick Henry. They got Derrick Henry, definitely put him in the Super Bowl contender category. They won the division and won all season long. They were a Super Bowl contender heading into the playoffs. they didn't make it to the AFC Championship game.
Yeah.
So by your theory there, so
No,
they not?
I think they are. I think that line can. We're talking about a team that wasn't in the playoffs, so if I can't map a way for them to potentially get there, then I wouldn't. I think there's some teams in the playoffs that aren't Super Bowl contenders, and I think there are some teams that get out before the championship that are. So yeah, I mean, now I'm going to shoot myself in the foot. I don't think the Commanders were a Super Bowl contender. I think the Ravens were. I know they played in the NFC Championship game. They lost by 30. At what point in that game were they contending? So, I think it's a fluid situation. I mean, because the team wasn't in the playoffs, the fact that I can map them in my mind to the conference championship game is the bar that I'm trying to use to determine my argument here.
Mr. Mo's saying his definition is he would be shocked. If you're shocked that a team makes the Super Bowl.
I wouldn't have been shocked if the Bengals made that Super Bowl.
I wouldn't have been shocked.
I would have been shocked if the Commanders made the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But yeah, I think of the AFC, and I don't think it's a coincidence. Joe Burrow and the Bengals, Josh Allen and the Bills, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, and Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, arguably the top 4 quarterbacks in the league. So I don't think it's a coincidence, that those are 4 Super Bowl contending teams. And it's just weird. That's why the Bengals, because at first I'm like, well, that's a generic thing. Like the Bengals, are they a Super Bowl contender? But I think that they are. I think that if they made and again, they didn't. So we're moving the goalpost around a little bit, but I think that they were more of a Super Bowl contender out of the playoffs than some of the teams that made the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's what makes. And by the way, that's why this Bengals team is such a weird talking point, because the front office, none of this makes sense. You can't look at. That's what you guys were screaming all year. Look at the year Joe Burrow had, that Jamar Chase had, that Trey Hendrickson had, that T and all these. The offense had. There's no way in hell that we should have been talking about that team not being in the playoffs. And I think if they would have snuck into the playoffs, you guys were saying it all along, no one in the top half of the AFC was going to want to play the Bengals. Nobody was going to want to play the Bengals at that point. So, and if they roll it back with the same team next year, basically with a couple changes here or there, I still think they're going to be viewed as a Super Bowl contending team.
They should be. And they should be.
We'll see. And if not, Zach Taylor will be unemployed. Simple as that.
Over under, if you had to bet right now, over under 10.5 wins by the Cincinnati Bengals next year, without knowing anything.
Take the over.
Jake,
I'll take the over. Here's the other thing. I do think the narrative of the slow starts, I think, gets overblown, and here's why. People keep trying to make it about, man, Zach Taylor needs to play guys more in preseason. Honestly, it's just pretty simple. Joe Burrow just needs to be healthy. I know we deemed him healthy this preseason, but we saw it in the game against the Patriots. That wrist was still kind of getting a little used to it as the season went on, and when it got comfortable, he was rolling, right? I just do. I think it's as simple as that. Now, it's going to sound like, I'm blaming Joe Burrow for why they've struggled the last. But Joe Burrow's health has been why I think they get off to such a slow start every single year. I think if Joe Burrow is healthy right off the bat in week 1 of this upcoming season and they get off to a slow start, Zach Taylor needs to be gone at that point, because then I'll say, okay, maybe it has been coaching. But I do think it's as simple as when Joe Burrow's wrist or any part of him has been healthy and he's healthy, the team plays at a Super Bowl contending level. When he hasn't been healthy, that's what's led to some of these slow starts. I just think it's as simple as Joe Burrow's health equals a better start each and every year. It's as simple as that. Maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but I don't really think that it's anything Zach Taylor's done wrong in the month of September. I just think it's every September Joe Burrow has been recovering from some kind of major injury or surgery, and I think that's tough to do, and I think it's as simple as that at the end of the day.
I was in that boat with you until last offseason when Joe basically asked to play in the preseason, and then this offseason when he said, well, that wasn't really what I meant. One drive wasn't really what I meant. I'd like to play more in the preseason. If they're going to ask for it, the only reason why you wouldn't play them in the preseason is because they don't want to play in the preseason. So if your starters are asking to play in the preseason, if they are healthy, obviously it's a different situation. If they're recovering from any kind of injury or are banged up at all during practice, you're not risking that during the preseason. But I think it's certainly a step this season that we should expect to see them more. If they're going to ask for it, I don't know why you wouldn't. And now, if we've tried none and it didn't work, and then we tried one drive and it didn't work, now let's try a quarter. And who knows what the answer is, but keep trying something until the slow starts go away.
Fair enough. I'm out of time. I got to jump on KB's show. You guys have box lunch coming up, correct?
Box lunch right around the corner.
Yep, box lunch at high noon. See everybody there.
Cool. All right,
So
we'll do it again
noon.
tomorrow.
Huh?
Sober noon.
Okay.
Not a high noon. Anyways.
Yeah, jokes are usually funnier when you explain them, Kinner.
Yep. Adios. It wasn't my joke. It wasn't even my joke. I was explaining.
Goodbye. Goodbye.